Wonderful. So, hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. My name is Sarah Tico. I am the founder of Hatsumi and also occasionally work with Immerse UK on events like this. I've been working with Immerse UK now for just over 2 years. And really, it was kind of through my own journey of founding my own company and thinking about, well, what does it mean to work in XR and healthcare? And how do I develop this, and where will I ever be able to distribute it? How do we think about, regulation and ethics and sort of really reaching the people that will benefit from this the most? And so it started as a sort of like, what could we possibly do together? We ran our first ever conference in November 2018, and since then it's really sort of grown and developed, and we've looked at everything from like the applications and implications of XR to even imagining what an NHS virtual reality strategy might even look like as well. So during this time, I've been really delighted to work very closely with Barclays Eagle Labs. So in pre-COVID times, we would have been doing this in person. We actually initially ran this as a touring series across the UK and went from everywhere from Liverpool to London and Manchester and all over the place, and really kind of seeing what fascinating things people are doing across the regions. But with COVID, it's actually been a real pleasure to be able to do this online, because we've been able to engage with people far beyond where we usually could, and it's a real pleasure to have people like Jessica join us all the way from Colorado in the US, and start to think about the different applications of XR in health across the world. And it's a real pleasure to talk about paediatrics and mental health today as well. I think, young people deal with mental health problems from an early age, and I really love the saying, like, how do we turn off the taps instead of continuing to mop up the floors, and how can we intervene earlier on to get people to learn skills for self-regulating, managing their own anxiety, and involving play in the process, and thinking about how this can actually support adults as well. And so over today, we're going to be exploring how immersive technology is used in storytelling and play, and thinking about ways that we can create new forms of understanding and empathy around the challenges of mental health as well. So I'm just about to pass over to Dawn, who represents Barclays Eagle Labs, and then we'll get started with our speakers. So we'll have 10-minute presentations from everybody. Feel free to put comments in the Q&A part of the chat. If there are specific questions for the speakers, then just between each talk, then we'll ask 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll go into a sort of wider panel discussion and Q&A before wrapping up at 6:30. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Dawn.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate the introduction. So, hi, I'm Dawn Carhart. I'm the Health Tech Manager for Eagle Labs, which is Barclays Eagle Labs, and it's great to be here today, and thank you so much to everybody for attending. So I guess just to give you a bit of an overview, if people don't know what Eagle Labs is or what we do, we're a national network of incubator spaces across the UK. We have over 25 Eagle Labs within that, and we help startups and scale-ups by accelerating them through connections that we have, and promoting collaborative innovation within that as well, and enabling access to and training on new and emerging technologies. So we have over 38 innovation partners within Eagle Labs, so the likes of Legal & General, Codebase, and if you have a look on our website, you'll see a lot more of our particular innovation partners. We've raised over 870 million, which is funding that's been raised by the tech startups that are in our spaces, and we have over 2,000 resident co-workers and 500 resident businesses within those particular labs that you can see on screen today. Over the past 2 years, we've been exploring the health tech industry, and we understand that the industry has more and more emerging technologies, and therefore bringing more investment opportunities to the sector. Over that period, we've built up a network of over 360 health tech businesses that we support on a daily basis. And some of those support methods have been through accelerators. So we have a P4 precision medicine accelerator that we do with UCL and Capital Enterprise. And we also have a Propel at YH Digital Health Accelerator, which is aiding and supporting COVID-19, which is both open for applications if anyone has a great technology that they would like to apply to those particular accelerators with. And if you want to find out any more information on that, then please do check our website. I guess just going back to Sarah and our journey of talking around XR and immersive technologies, and how me and Sarah became great partners in crime in running these events across the UK. As Sarah stays from London to, you know, Edinburgh, we've been running some fantastic events around exploring in certain subjects, and we are really proud to be a partner of the with Immerse UK. And some of the events that we've done in the past are around sort of financial wellbeing, sort of arts therapy, and even to as far as femtech VR. So yeah, so that's a bit about Eagle Labs Health. And if you want to know anything more, then please drop us a line at healthtechteaglelabs@barclays.com, and I'll be able to help you with any other information that you require. Thanks, Sarah.
Cool, amazing. Thanks so much. And I'll give a little reminder at the end as well, but we have another event coming up at the end of the year on the 25th of November as well. We'll be talking about grief and XR, which I think is going to be really fascinating, and I think a big important talking point for a lot of people. And so with that, anyway, moving back onto the topic of today, it's my real delight to introduce Naomi Mwasambili. She's the co-founder and CEO of Chanua and director of Livy Africa, focusing on eco-innovation projects in Tanzania. For 12 years now, she's been working in the area of social innovation, inclusive business, healthcare, mental health, technology and research, and has been doing some absolutely amazing work in response to COVID-19 as well, in the development of NeuroLove. So please give her a very, very warm welcome. I'm sure she has some fantastic things to share. So over to you, Naomi.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's a delight to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me. Let me get my screen up and share it with you. This is where you like need a musical interlude, you know, so you can have the music where people are pausing between the tech changes. Okay, so hello. Nikki, I can see you dancing there. Is that the music in the background? So it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Naomi Mwasambili, and I run an organisation called Chanua, where we work on a range of healthcare innovation projects. Today I'm going to talk about one project in specific that we've been working with to, I guess, prevent young people developing mental health through teaching them about the brain, and mental health through play and games. And integrated within that, we have used different elements of XR through augmented reality as a learning tool, and also virtual reality to, I guess, teach young people about their emotions. But I guess, like everybody else, COVID has hit us all well, hit us all very hard and changed our perspectives. And before COVID, we were I guess, deep in thinking about how technology is a positive tool for change. And then COVID hit and isolated a lot of people, not just here, but globally, and really, I guess, highlighted some of the systemic issues that children and young people are experiencing right now. And I guess one of the things I wanted to talk about is the importance of those children's experiences in this process, because I think what can happen, and sometimes what we can do with technology leads a solution. And one of the key things is that young people and children's voices, and I know I'm a complete hypocrite because I'm talking as not a child, even though I may look young, you know, and sharing my experiences, but actually it's really key that they come through, because that's the world that we're creating the world for them with these technologies, with I guess view that we have of the world, and without them, I guess at the forefront of it, are we really meeting their needs, or are we meeting our own needs? So this is one of the questions that I keep asking myself through the work that we do, and I think it's really, really key for anybody to do that. So Sarah gave me a bit of background, but this is me. I'm Naomi. I like to think I've got superpowers. I believe in humans. So even though I love technology, believe in the power of humans and human connectivity. And I guess our process is to use technology as a tool to foster human connectivity, and to either teach young people about themselves and their emotions so they can connect with other humans, and not to necessarily isolate themselves. I have worked clinically in the NHS. I'm sort of paused a PhD in digital technology and children and young people's mental health. I've done a range of research projects looking at the application specifically for early identification, early intervention in children and young people's mental health. And it's a growing area, and it's an area that there's a lot of interest in now. So it's really, really important that we do it right, because the lasting impact of creating interventions and solutions for young people that don't take their needs into account is catastrophic and can be catastrophic. So I guess people will know these figures, and it's Suicide Prevention, Suicide Awareness Day today. Suicide is the biggest killer of men in the UK, and it has been for a long period of time, and teenagers and teenage boys as well. And so we know that 1 in 4 young people will experience a mental health problem, and 24% start before the age of 14. And I guess in our side of things is the majority of young people, whether it's at school, whether it's at home, and whether it's within their peer groups, don't learn about themselves, don't learn about their development, don't learn about their brains. And so we're really interested in, I guess, the prevention side of things, because what happens is people see a problem, see it as an illness, and then provide a solution for the illness. But actually, if we thought about how young people live their lives, we could prevent things actually occurring. However, it's not as sexy to prevent things happening, especially in healthcare, because we work within illness frameworks and we work within illness models. And so therefore, if young people don't have a diagnosis or there's not a label attached to it, often they can't get a solution to that. And so it's really important that we look and see how we can identify problems and we can prevent mental health developing within children and young people. So I guess we looked at that prevention area, and as a team came together and created Neurochampions. And I guess it's a lab where we have different products and programs where we teach young people about the brain, mental health, and neuroscience through play and through games. And I guess working as a clinician and our team as well, often when young people came to us, it was a point where they'd experienced trauma, and you have to build up a relationship with young people. And many of the panel members who are going to talk after me will echo that fact. And actually, you know, talking about your mental health, especially if it's at a point of crisis, is not the nicest thing to be doing. You're sometimes reliving that trauma. And, you know, for us, we were like, why should learning about yourself and why should learning about your brain not be fun? Why should it not involve play? And what tools can we use that are out there, offline and online, to be able to support young people to see that as something that they want to do? So around 4 years ago, we created Neurochampions to do that, really. And for us, young people were always at the core of the co-design. So what it looked like then was very, very different to what it looked like now. An example is we wanted to have a physical product of the brain. So we started with paper brains that we cut up and made into a jigsaw puzzle. They then evolved into like plasticine, you can see there, games, which has then evolved into a 3D printed brain as well, which then has evolved into like AR trigger cards, which then show different parts of the brain as well. So, you know, we always start with, I guess, basic tech, take it to young people, and then it evolves from there. So for us, our stage one is thinking about, okay, what are the problems? What are the things that young people are experiencing? And also, what are the cheap, effective tools that we can use without bringing technology that can actually have a positive impact? Because I think sometimes when we lead technology first, we realize a lot of the young people we're working with haven't got access to sort of a lot of the digital hardware that's needed. They might not know the capability of what they've got on their phones as well. So really start at low fidelity. So we went around the UK to different groups of young people, gaining feedback, playing games with them, finding out about their mental health, find out about how they talk about their mental health as well. And we ran different programs in schools and community bases to really just, I guess, build our knowledge that it wasn't our voice, but also get the young people as part of the co-development process. So the young people also became part of our team. Alongside that, I was leading a research project as well. There's a lot of words on this slide, but in my department, we were doing research around children and young people, but there was no children and young people as researchers, which means that what happens is they become, I guess, somebody who you go and ask questions to, but they're not driving and they're not creating the digital tools or the research. So what we had to do in the university is to be able to employ and create researchers, train young people as researchers, train them in different types of technology, so they understood what VR was, how to use VR, virtual reality, how to use AR, thinking about mental health. And then they co-developed different interventions, and they thought about how those tools could be used within school-based approaches. So some of the problems that they came up with in schools specifically was that they had limited support. There was lack of care, compassion, there was lack of digital skills. So when thinking about like creating tools for young people, there's an assumption that all young people can adopt, I guess, any digital intervention, but there was a lack of digital skills that was available. And I guess on our side, what we started to realize is there was a lack of knowledge of VR and AR, virtual reality and augmented reality. A lot of young people had mobile phones, smartphones actually, that were virtual reality enabled or augmented reality enabled, but had never used that type of technology. So they didn't know that it even existed. There was sometimes danger in creating a digital solution where there was no need, lack of understanding around data that could have been collected. So there's no processes really to protect young people. And so I guess we started then thinking about how we could create different digital products. And for us, a big part of it was, I mean, we spoke about regulation and understanding emotions, but using scenarios so young people could understand basic emotions like worry and anxiety, but also feel calm in a relaxing environment, but then also think about how they could educate themselves about what virtual reality was and what augmented reality was. So they created mini videos about those different digital tools for their peers and for their school as well. So the model that we use in Euro Champions is basically supporting young people to manage difficult life events, understand themselves, access support and care for others by teaching them about their brain, teaching them about ways to love themselves, having a global approach to that and doing that through play. And then that's the core of how we then build our different, I guess, solutions for different programs. I won't go through this, but this is a young leaders program that's delivered within schools. And then so that within that, we embed different teaching methodologies, which also include AR and VR as well. I'll sit on this one because I think that when co-developing any solution, what we find is you straddle a range of different worlds and a range of different sectors. And for us, play is at the core of everything we do, but we work with developers who have never sometimes worked with children and young people. We work with healthcare professionals who sometimes are so tech phobic that they are biased against the impact of tech. And we work with teachers who are focused on the resources that they don't have or they do have. So we've had to bring like multidisciplinary groups together through a range of co-development sessions to think about models that we can work with to rapidly build digital tools and rapidly build technology. And I guess the approaches and the psychological approaches that we embed within our work are counselling, CBT, and very much creative therapies. I get engaging with young people, and that's not just like art, but music based as well, therapies. We look at sort of like the context of which young people are working in. So we have partnership with Alder Hey Children's Hospital, where we've delivered programs within the hospital setting. We work within school settings where we've delivered work in school settings, and community settings where we work with like targeted youth services, and young people within third sector organisations as well, to think about how we can create safe spaces and we can encourage young people to use technology in these different areas. So from that first stage, what we do is, I guess, gather the information, and then what we do is we co-create together. So we do something called neuro hacks. So we bring everybody together over a very short period of time, and we start to build the different tools. So we've built some of our AR learning tools within neuro hacks there. You can see on the right hand side there's some of the topics that they wanted to create. We taught young people how to use Unity and basic Unity tools so they could then create their AR apps on Samsung mobiles. And what we've started to do as well is we've been out in Jamaica, been out in Tanzania to look at how then those digital tools can be applied in community-based settings as well there. So earlier this year, just before COVID, we were in Tanzania and we were training up community-based practitioners and community champions to think about how they could use some of these tools in their settings as well. So I'm gonna, I guess, I don't know how long I've got, maybe I've got a few more minutes, come to the end. So thank you for listening to that part, and that's the work part of it. But I think on one of the other sides, and especially during COVID, one of the things that I feel that I guess I necessarily haven't done, but also many of us haven't done, is haven't looked at through the eyes of a child. And one of the things I'd like to share is a poem. I can't do a VR experience with you right now, which I would do, but with a lot of young people that we work with, the systemic impacts of their lives have had an impact on what they're creating. So if I could inspire you as developers, as creators, as makers, to really put young people at the core and see some of the world through different young people's eyes, I'd like to do that with this poem, and that's how I would like to end my presentation. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll share the poem with you now.
My child, there is a world that you cannot see, because the eyes you have been given are not the ones that allow you to be free. They start off very clear with no boundaries to be found, the kind that restricts you in thinking that light travels faster than sound. But as you grow, your sight does too, influenced by the things it sees and believes to be true. The way you eat is not right, they said. A knife and fork is the proper way to be fed. The feeling you feel, your name is said wrong. And the class starts to laugh. So to silence yourself, you smile and sing a song. And none of the textbooks look quite like you. So you beg to buy chemicals to straighten your hair because you believe your ugliness to be true. And you know all the answers to the questions that are asked, but you're silenced again, called a show-off, and develop the position of being masked. When you start to become embarrassed when people ask, but where are you actually from? Because it reminds you that they never thought that you belong. When you are the only one that they see to break any of the rules, most of which make no sense, but result in enforcement tools. When you're forced to sit for hours, when your body needs to move, so you get distracted by everything, the only way you can self-soothe. When you walk into a room and feel the power of the stare, so you work on being invisible to the pain caused by the glare. When we becomes I, and you feel like you're in it alone. My child, this is the time that your eyes have stopped being your own. However, we have the ability to regenerate our eyes. Yes, a skill never taught in school with its books and its lies. You have the power inside to turn I into we and come together with each other to create a brand new destiny. But first, you must see beyond what the eyes want you to see. The ability that you have and the power to be free. An unfamiliar feeling of uncertainty that disorientates us from our current reality. But sit with it, child, and come together. Your sisters, brothers, fathers and mothers, to join your eyes and create a vision that's not viewable without each other's. One where you are valued for your divine energy and where love and compassion is your first priority, where you care and you share and you promote unity. Because coming together and doing this Allow your eyes to be free.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so, so much, Naomi. It's such a beautiful way to conclude a presentation. Would you be able to share the info about like where you found that poem? I'm sure there'll be lots of people that would be interested to come back to that at some point. Yeah, if you want to put it in the chat, I think I'm sure lots of people would be interested. Also, just as we move to the next speaker, I think it's always really interesting to find out who's in the room as well. So if you just want to put into the chat, you know, sort of what kind of discipline you're from. I think we do try and keep these events as very multidisciplinary. Anyone from, you know, artists and creatives to people working in enterprise applications of XR to investment bankers. We've had it all, but yeah, always nice to know what sort of interest people have. And with that, I'm very excited to invite to the stage Nikki Smith. Nikki is a game designer, artist and teacher. He is the co-founder of Monobanda, a Utrecht-based interactive art collective that develops playful interactive experiences. He is the co-founder of Explore Deep, an award-winning meditative virtual reality experience controlled by breathing, and a very good friend and collaborator of mine. So welcome, Nikki, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much for that amazing intro. Let's start by sharing my presentation. Y'all can hear me, right? And y'all can see my presentation now, right? Okay, then I think we are ready to go. So, hello. As Sarah said, I am co-founder of Deep, a meditative virtual reality game controlled by deep belly breathing. But I'm not going to talk about Deep specifically because I am also co-founder of Monobanda, Dutch art collective. And for the last 12 years, together with my colleague Simon, we have been making play. So what we see as play is like real playful behavior. So we're not talking about games. We're talking about the freedom of expression. Play is about empowering you, learning and discovering, thinking with your hands, feeling safe to experiment, using your body, and a lot of other connotations that I'm sure you're familiar with. So actually, we make a lot of projects in which the human body is central. So in one project, it might be putting on weird helmets and having and exploring the social space and how far you are from other people. In another project, it might be using to control your voice and the joy of screaming really loud or whispering really soft, or putting your hands into the sand. So we make a lot of performative spaces, by which I mean that most of our games, most of the things we make, do not have a set goal. It's more like we want to create open-ended spaces where people can get reconnected to their own creativity, to their own expression, and to their own physical body. So you can already see how that has an overlap with Deep, which is a virtual reality game controlled by your own breathing. So, and there's, in the short time that we have, there's just a few examples that I want to give because otherwise this stays sort of esoteric. One of the projects I've been working on the last year is kinesics, and more precisely the concept copy-paste dance, where we research the role of social body language in virtual reality. So we had this thought when we started to play multiplayer virtual reality for the first time. So then you're not in that VR world alone. There's other people there. And I was blown a bit away by how good you could see another person's expression and humanity shining through just by the simple nuances of the head movement, which you can track in VR, of course, and the hand movement, you know, with the two controllers. So, and even those like 3 puppet things were enough to imbue a lot of sort of human characteristics in a online avatar. And we were like, wow, you know, we all know that human communication is 50% body language. But then if we look at the most common way of communicating nowadays online, we don't have body language. We have voice text, voice chat and text. So immediately in our most prevalent form of communicating nowadays, half of our expression is gone. So we thought, like, it is coming. We know it's coming. Like, there's a reason big social platforms like Facebook have bought up VR with Oculus. So what if we start creating playful experience of which we don't know the end result, just to see how people react to them and how people behave in them. So one of the interesting things we saw was there was a lot of hugging, which of course gets a lot more relevant in these times of social distancing, where we saw people in VR not being physically in the same space, but still enjoying hugging. And the game wasn't even about hugging, you know, it was about doing other things. But we constantly saw players moving towards each other and exploring each other's embodied virtual bodies, which is really interesting to see. There's a lot more to talk about with this project. We have a blog on our website about it, but for now, in the interest of speed, I want to move on to another example. Which is an example my colleague is working on. So my colleague is working together with the Radboud University, which is a university in the Netherlands, and Plurijn, which is a healthcare organization in the Netherlands, to create projects for children with special needs and also children with anger issues, to be more precise. And we started out totally open-ended. So what we like to do is, again, all our projects are about human play, is we don't want to blueprint that down, like this is the problem and this is what we're going to make to solve it. We very much are an art collective. We start from an artistic starting point, and our art form is play, creating situations that unlock human potential. So even before we started making new projects, he roped in all our old projects and let them play with that, which was really interesting. We made this installation, which I'm going to show you in a second, where it's called Voice Dancers. And it's a very simple, playful installation where you make sound, you scream, and then one of those wind puppets, it goes up into the air, it inflates, because your screaming is actually switching the fan, the turbine to on. And so, can we move to the next slide? So, what was really interesting to see here is that together with the caretakers, we noted that children that at the beginning of today were not really accessible because they had all these sort of build up energy, which in a normal context you would call anger. But then if you give them a game in which they can unleash their energy, afterwards they were a lot more approachable and a lot more talkative, because during the game they felt in control and they could use their control to expand their excess energy. So this is just a little sneak peek in what we're doing. This is not an end product, but this is in these kind of ways, by just working extremely iteratively, we take playful behaviors and connect them to people and sort of see what sticks. So I want to get back to that way of working in a second.
Oh, 2 minute warning, by the way, Nikki.
2 minutes. Okay, thank you. Then I will switch over this project very briefly, where we took the VR version of Deep and created a museum installation in Science Museum, Nemo Science Museum in the Netherlands, where you still control the game by breathing, but it's not in VR anymore. And we made this installation within the context of using deep belly breathing to combat anxiety and depression issues. But yeah, our work method could be described as filling the space between art, science, and education. So we love working together as artists. We love working together with educators and with scientists to not reinvent wheels on our own, but be connected to other people that know their stuff, and then dive into the deep end. So often we feel like we are cave explorers. So we do not know which answers we're going to solve. So what we do with our artistic approach, with technology as our light, we take a step into the dark. We walk into places that haven't been explored yet, in the hope of uncovering all these beautiful new places where we haven't been before. And creating new projects in those ways, but also unlocking new chances, new behaviors, and hopefully new solutions. So yeah, it's a very collaborative process where we most of the time work together with researchers, make a prototype, test it, talk about it, then go back to the drawing board and do new stuff, but never blueprint it down. So we always go back to that artistic drive where we, through years of experience, have sort of this instinctive feeling of what is accessible and what gets people playing, and take it from there. So we design for emotional impact. I'm going to switch over that, and then I will say thank you so much for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nikki. Really fascinating. If anyone does have any questions, by the way, please feel free. There's a Q&A option in the toolbar below, and feel free to add any questions that you may have, and we will do our best to address them. And so with that, we'll move on to the next speaker now. Nikki, you're still sharing your screen if you want to close it down when you have a mo. And next up we have Dr. Sarah Campbell. I met her very recently. She's a fellow on the Nesta and Story Futures Immersive Mental Health Programme. And she has 15 years experience, in fact, working in wellbeing and education, including publishing work on immersive experiences in learning contexts. She's had a pretty fascinating career, both as a musician and on the business side of the music industry as well, and integrates creative industry and arts-based approaches to facilitation, training, and educating throughout, mostly and applied to games-based approaches. She completed her PhD in psychology and has also founded Playful for Life, an educational games company that creates engaging online and offline games to help children learn the skills they need to succeed in life. So with that, Sarah, whenever you're ready, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Naomi and Nikki. It's really lovely to just watch your presentation and enjoy your the amazing work you're doing. And a bit especially a thank you to Naomi, because you've set up really nicely many of the things I'm going to raise. So thank you for that, particularly around co-design. So hi everyone, it's really nice to be here today. I'm just going to start my timer so I don't talk for hours and hours, which I could do. So as Sarah introduced me, I'm Sarah as well. So I'm CEO of Playful for Life, which is an educational games company, and the games we create are specifically around helping children and young people develop the skills they need to succeed in life. So sort of transferable skills, wellbeing skills, things like that. And I am a psychologist and an educator, and I think I got frustrated with some of the constraints of working within those systems, and just have always passionately believed, as other people have said today, that kind of learning through play, learning by doing, and having that room to really explore offers so much potential, which is why I set up Playful for Life. And we were really fortunate, as Sarah mentioned, to be part of the Story Futures Nesta mental health and immersive fellowship program. So this was our first experience with augmented reality. And as a result of that, sorry to the VR fans out there, but I am going to be really waving the AR flag tonight. So yeah, we've created an immersive AR and smart technology board game to support adolescent mental health. And it's specifically to educate and train wellbeing skills across 4 areas of wellbeing. So I'm going to very briefly sort of give a bit of an introduction to the board game. And then I really want to talk about 3 things that, being new to this area, I've been sort of left with and that I feel really passionate about, and hope to sort of be able to pioneer some movement in those areas. So, but I think first of all, really, where the idea for Dragons of Afterland probably came from when we were first thinking about it is this idea of stories and the power of stories for people to learn. And I've been obsessed with fairy tales since I was a child, and I'm still obsessed with fairy tales now. And I think that what they offer is the ability to really go with your imagination and to think about and explore what seems impossible. And for children and young people, when you're talking about mental health, particularly if they've had very difficult childhood experiences, being able to imagine other worlds, imagine other possibilities is really important. And as Naomi said, you can learn a lot, but actually for some children, asking them to sit in front of you and just talk about themselves can feel incredibly exposing. And when people talk about themselves, they're really just telling narratives and telling stories. And so this idea of using narratives and storytelling, but abstracted from the self, can be really, really, really valuable for children and young people. So we really wanted to bring that idea of storytelling into the game we were creating as a way to firstly be more engaging around wellbeing for children and young people, but also make it safer for them to explore and learn new knowledge and skills. And I think also the reason I was interested in looking at augmented reality is, as a child, I went on ghost hunts with my brother and my friends, and we went dragon chasing. And that idea of bringing that kind of magical, fantastical world into a social experience where we would go hunting in the woods. The reason I'm drawn to augmented reality is it enables you to bring that sort of digital fantasy into some sort of shared social physical world experience. And I also really believe that AR's got that magic, because a lot of people still aren't that familiar with it. They don't recognize what's on Snapchat is AR, that idea of seeing something pop out. And when we've been working with our project, seeing, children kind of looking behind, trying to, and adults as well, trying to find what's behind the screen. So, and for me, that joy and that magic is what comes from fairy tales and fantasy stories. And if we can bring that into an engaging experience, that's a perfect way to get young people interested and then start having the conversations that are so important to help them with their mental health. So we were very grateful to be able to do this project. And what's really important in children and young people's well-being is fostering that connection. And a lot of young people are very good at communicating digitally, but actually we've seen that that verbal communication in person they can still struggle with, but it's still a really important skill. And that's why storytelling's made a lot of sense to us in this project. So we've got an avatar dragon witch that tells almost half the story and guides the players. And then during the wellbeing challenges in our game, players have to tell stories in order to pass the challenges, which you need to do in order to win and finish a game. And also bringing this physical and digital combination, there's quite a backlash amongst parents and schools around screen time and is it good, is it bad? And therefore we felt by grounding it in a physical kind of social experience, this enables some people who are concerned about the use of technology to overcome some of those concerns and take the best of both worlds, really. So our game is collaborative storytelling. We've got in-game measurement and biofeedback. And basically we didn't just want to augment using augmented reality in terms of a screen, we decided to augment the board as well. So when our natural disasters are triggered, the board heats up or cools down or vibrates. We've got lights. All the processes in the game are triggered by the hardware in the board. So this has made it a really multi-sensory experience, bringing in the tactile sense as well as the auditory and the visual. And we've got these wellbeing challenges. So across 4 different areas, as well as communication skills. Our players are developing those as they play the game, along with the biofeedback. So we're really excited about it, and just seeing the way children and young people are engaging is really exciting. And it's been, you know, developing this through lockdown. We've ended up with people, it's felt like, in all sorts of different parts of the world and various challenges. So it's been a really interesting development process, and I think it's left me really with sort of what's important as a new company and a new company coming into this space. And I think one of the things I wanted to do initially was, I don't know anyone who grew up in the 80s and used to watch that program Nightmare, you know, we wanted our players to dress up and have headsets to make it as immersive as possible. And we imagined creating these headsets out of helmets. And actually, in reality, the AR headsets and the goggles just aren't there. The cardboard ones we experimented with tied us into certain software, but also couldn't be worn for that long. And when you move your head, the phone fell out. And we really felt that making this inclusive, making it accessible to everyone, currently kind of the high-end headsets that just preclude an awful lot of people. And I think there's really exciting immersive experiences possible, but it's frustrating that sort of AR headsets and goggles seem to be continuously delayed. So a big call to anyone in that area, please prioritize that, because I do believe for young people, and when we're talking about mental health and school environments, VR is limited in what it can offer compared to AR, which brings me on to my next point. I feel like AR is still the ghost fighting the dragon of VR. You know, the social capacity and capabilities of AR are so important. As more and more happens on screen for young people, and we see a huge rise in social anxiety for many, many young people, even if not at a clinical level, this ability to create social and shared experiences are really important. But also, I've seen and also talked to many parents who, you know, their family dinner time and their holidays, and now their kids tied to a screen. And actually, if there's a way we can create shared intergenerational experiences that's fun for everyone, this can really start to break down barriers. And we found that using storytelling about dragons and things like that in the game, this allows people to connect through conversations, and those tricky, difficult, uncomfortable conversations around mental health with children and young people can be much more easily facilitated when you're talking about a shared, engaging AR experience. So I'm a huge advocate for kind of more engaging AR playful experiences that everyone can engage with, and we can cross and take down some of those barriers. And then I think, you know, as Naomi talked about, we co-design all of our games with young people, and I think that magic you get from creating things for young people, but making sure they're created by young people, is so important. And I think it was challenging for us with this project, because this was the first time we were co-designing remotely. So we had 16 young people coming to focus groups online. None of them knew each other, they didn't know us, and we had to get really creative with how we engaged them in that new space, how they could engage with the project and the development. But it was also amazing. What happened was, it meant that kids could go and get stuff from their room to show us what they meant. And as we were screen sharing, they saw artwork in our Slack channel we hadn't planned to share, and it grabbed their attention. It took those conversations elsewhere. So it was really creative. Young people have created all parts of our game now, and that collaboration is so important, and I don't think happens enough in this space, rather than just involving them in the testing phase. And then you know it's engaging. And if we really want to be creating great interventions or great tools for children and young people, they need to be engaged in that process and creating them with us, as Naomi talked about. So yeah, the whole project's been really fantastic and really challenging for us. And I'm now just a massive advocate of the potential of AR for children and young people's mental health and development. So what's next for us? The fairy tale is we've got a partnership with Royal Holloway. So we've got a clinical psychologist who's actually doing her doctoral thesis on Dragons of Afterlands, which means we need to have it in schools for trialling next April. So anyone who's interested in helping us with that, we'd be very grateful for. But aware of the current situation, we are we are really aware and have been, we need to develop a version that can be purely online or can be printed off at home without the physical augmentation, so people can still play it together even if they can't come together, although our board is handily socially distanced at 1 meter squared, so that's very handy. In terms of, you know, the ghosts and the dragons, anyone who's fundraised will understand why that's the term I've attached to funding. So we're now looking for funding to take us from prototype to the market ready product. But really, at Play Well for Life and with Dragons of Afterlands, we really want to be part of demonstrating how AR can really be fantastic and positive and accessible to everyone, and how we can bring it into the mainstream to really make this part of the Games for Good movement. So it's been an absolute pleasure being here, and yeah, look forward to the rest of the evening. So thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah. And yeah, absolutely agree. I think storytelling is such an integral part of that experience, and like all of us, and sort of shaping how we have come to be the people we are. I've always been really fascinated by how much, you know, the stories that we've grown up with have influenced that. I think Sabrina the Teenage Witch influenced me much more than I care to usually share. But I had a quick question actually from Robert Vincent in the audience. He says, great presentation, Sarah. Is it possible to see or buy the fab game that you've just talked about?
Oh yes, so all of the videos in the presentation were excerpts from it, and all of the photos. So we are testing the prototype at the moment, so it's a full 1 hour game experience. I'm very happy to share longer videos of that. Our plan is for the market release to be next April. So yeah, very happy to please take my details and we can talk afterwards.
Fabulous, thank you. I know you shared your contact details at the end, but perhaps if you want to pop them in the chat as well, then you can pick it up, and anyone else speaking that would like to do so as well. And on that note, I guess, of talking about playful games, both in VR and AR and tablet context, it gives me a real pleasure to invite Jessica Stone. She is a licensed psychologist, and where are my notes? I do know all these things. That works in the private practice setting in Colorado. She has been a practitioner, professor, presenter, mentor, and author for over 25 years, exploring everything across therapeutic digital tools, specifically usually using virtual reality tablets and consoles. She's also published a variety of incredible books around digital play therapy, and is a real leader in this field. And finally, she is the co-creator of the Virtual Sand Tray app for iPad and in VR as well. And we've been chatting about various projects and scheming different ways to work together over the years as well. So thank you so much for getting up early to join us, and over to you.
Great, thank you. I'm really happy to be here, and I have such a long list of things now I need to talk with all of you panelists about, and would love to use so many of these things in my practice. I'm just really excited. So I've thought of a million things that I want to add to what I'm going to say, and I know I'm not going to remember to cover all of them. So I just hope that we can continue to have these conversations, and it's an exciting, not only just an exciting time, but it's amazing to see so many different disciplines coming together and working together. I am a clinical psychologist. I'm a registered play therapist since the early 90s, which at this point kind of freaks me out to say because that was a really long time ago. But the good thing about all of that is that I've had a lot of clinical experience to bring together some really phenomenal foundations for people who work in the world of play to be able to understand how what we're doing has value, not only the value we see, but how we communicate that with others. So basically, my journey started years ago, and even before all of this XR, VR, AR, MR, I was in a program where I had a professor who really emphasized speaking your client's language. And so I have spent years paying attention to what my clients are bringing in. I specialize in working with children. I have a specialty in ecosystemic clinical child psychology. And so it's really been a focus for all these years. And paying attention to what my clients bring in and what value that might hold for them, so that we can talk about something that's highly motivating to them and that will bring other value and components into the work that we're doing, working them toward their therapeutic goals. And as we've gone along, those things have changed over the years, and currently we have a very big interest in integration in tools of technology. Obviously, I'm stating the obvious, but we have all these children and now teens and even young adults who are basically digital natives. They've been brought up with all of this and they don't know life without it. So I wrote in the book that Sarah spoke of, the digital play therapy book that just published in July, I wrote in there that the older generations are saying, why would we incorporate these tools into therapy? And the younger generations are going to be saying, why wouldn't we? And I think all of us here are working toward responsibly putting forth materials, information, experiences that are of high quality and taking into account the tenets that we all hold dear and keeping those in the forefront when we're doing these projects. So fast forward to the tsunami in Japan, and I said to a friend of mine who had put a post out on Facebook that she needed materials to work with people who were ground zero. And I said, well, how are you going to do Sandtray? And I said it to my husband as well. And I'll get into a moment for those of you who aren't familiar with Sandtray. My little presentation here will give you a sense of what that is. But basically, it's a tool that's been around getting close to 100 years and started by Dr. Margaret Lowenfeld. And it's used as a projective measure to be able to allow people to take what's on their inside, their experiences, their emotions and whatnot, and put it out onto something else. Art therapy, creative therapies have a lot of projective components to them. And you need a lot of materials to do this. And so it kind of catapulted me on this path of saying we need other ways to meet these needs for people who don't want to touch the traditional, can't access the traditional, crisis situations, medical situations, schools, all sorts of places. So that gave birth to the virtual Sandtray project. And so we started this in 2011. We went public in 2015. And later on in 2015, after going public with our iPad version, I said, we need to put this in VR. It just has to be, because it's a whole nother level experience on top of the power that is in traditional and then virtual Sandtray. So I'll give you a little sense for those of you who don't know what Sandtray therapy is. The picture on the left, that's actually in my office. So we have the tray, which is that wooden box, and it has a cover on it, but it does have sand inside. And then all the shelves are full of little miniature items. Some people, there are different theories and different foundations for sand work. So I'm just going to put it all together for you here, but just know there's different approaches. But basically, you're taking the items and you're putting them into the sand and you're creating a world, which is a little snippet of what you see there on the right-hand side. And Sarah Campbell, you'll be very, very happy to know that on the left-hand side there are 2 full shelves of dragons. I'm a big fan of dragons as well, and I cannot wait to use your product in my office. And Sandtray therapy, so there's a really seminal book by Homeyer and Sweeney, and they are giving us just a little snippet of what Sandtray is about. And it's an expressive and projective mode of psychotherapy involving the unfolding and processing of intra and interpersonal issues through the use of specific Sandtray materials. As a nonverbal medium of communication, it's led by the client and it's facilitated by a trained therapist. So you're not just a person plopping things in the sand, and when you're doing it virtually, you're not just sticking things that look like stickers onto something that looks like sand. You are creating a very immersive world. And we talk about flow theory, and there's so much of that that's talked about in the immersive XR world, and that is all built in here as well, whether you're doing traditional or something virtual. This is just a little blurb about projective for those people who may not be familiar with that. The Rorschach ink blot test is something that's been very commonly talked about. So that's what I give as a common example of, basically it's a blot of ink, but people then are putting their own experiences and emotional responses onto that material. Traditional sand is heavy and you need a lot of stuff in order to do traditional sand tray therapy. As you see, I have the whole setup and I love it. Here in COVID times, I'm doing 100% telehealth, so I'm not able to use any of that. Really, really grateful and thankful that we had this idea 10 years ago, because otherwise we would be scrambling right now to figure out what to do. So in COVID, previously, mental health providers as a whole, and some people have already alluded to that in their talks today, and those of you in the audience probably already have a sense of this, that have been a little bit hesitant to incorporate XR of any type into therapy. And then when we've hit this COVID situation, we created a need for a drastic shift in how we're doing pretty much everything. And I really focused on take the fundamental tenets that you were working on in your therapy in the first place and the goals that you were working on, and now you're finding other ways to meet those needs, whether it is online or it's you're using traditional materials and you have them on both ends, or you're doing something where you're meeting together in a multiplayer kind of situation, whatever it is. But even beyond COVID, we don't know what the return to the office is going to look like, whether or not we're going to do hybrid or telehealth only, or full on back into the office. And then of course we have all the cleanliness concerns. And if you can imagine, cleaning a big tray of sand between people is, I'm going to say it's impossible. I know there's some people who are going to argue with me, and there's different things you could put in the sand, but I would want to see some really good studies to know that the sand is actually sanitized. So it does, for me, still pose quite a concern. So give you a sense of the virtual sand tray app. This is created in the iPad version. And in response to COVID, we have created ways to meet up with your clients remotely. So the two devices connect in an encrypted connection, and all password protected and all that good stuff. For any of you who saw our virtual sand tray app in the Welcome Collection in London, it was in an exhibit there between October and March. I'm not quite sure when all that got shut down for you guys, so I don't know how long it went into March, but it was pretty exciting. We were right next to a Lowenfeld tray. So Dr. Lowenfeld, I mentioned earlier, Lowenfeld tray from the private exhibit, private collection that is there in London. It was really quite an honor. We have it for the iPad and iPhone. iPad obviously is a bigger screen than the iPhone, and then we also have it for virtual VR in the Vive and the Rift S. There's just some pros and cons. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think I've talked long enough, and I want to show you a little tiny video, but this gives you a little pros and cons of the virtual and the traditional. We can go in above and beyond the traditional. One of the big things that we can do in the virtual is that we can save trays and return back to them. In the traditional, you have to clean up everything that you've created so that the next person comes into a clean environment. Clean not meaning sanitized, because again, that's a challenge, but clean meaning the items are no longer there to be viewed by anyone else. Lots of special populations that we can work with and lots of different environments. And we just give you an idea of some of the different themes. We have skyboxes for the backgrounds and paints for the sand. We have over 7,000 3D models that can be put into the tray. And Sarah, you were talking about, and so was Naomi, about collaboration. Our collaboration didn't happen with the users, with our clients, didn't happen before the creation so much, because it was based on something that was already in existence in a traditional sense. But we collaborate now on the other end, where we constantly have feedback of different items that clients would like to have to be able to put into their tray. And so we collaborate in that sense. So lots of different
2-minute warning, by the way.
Thank you. Lots of different ways that these trays can be depicted. And then I just want to show you quickly in the last few minutes that last minute that I have. This is our VR version, and this is a beta video. So we don't have a distribution library at this point. we would really love to collaborate with people. My fantasy is to be part of a suite of mental health products that are available for users. Here we're up in God mode and we're looking down on the tray, digging down to the liquid layer. The traditional tray is often painted blue on the bottom. So when you dig down in the sand, then you'd have blue on the bottom. So here we've recreated that in the VR world. And you can build up the sand as well. We can, let's see if I can fast forward just a little bit for people. So you can put items in and then you can resize them, make them bigger, smaller, move them around. They have animation to many of them. So now we're coming down from God mode down onto the sand level and coming up to our beasts here, which looks, as we all know in VR, doesn't ever look on video like it does in person, right? So it's an amazing experience to be standing next to these beasts and watch them breathe and watch your changes. So I'm going to move on because I know that I'm running out of seconds as I speak. So let me go to my next slide. We have got some research, what we're seeking, basically collaboration. I'm so excited, not just in our project with the virtual sand tray, but also in collaborating in many other ways, because I don't just use this as VR in my practice. I use many other products and games, and I would love to continue to work in this sector, and collaborate with as many people as I can, because this is just an exciting time for all of us. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Really, really fascinating. And I think that's a wonderful segue into our Q&A for the next 20 minutes or so. So any thoughts or questions for any of the speakers, then please feel free to pop it in the Q&A section as well. I know that we did have one question from George Simons. It says, amazing presentations, everyone. Questions to Sarah and Naomi. What children's age ranges do you work with or target? And do you find certain age groups engage and react more positively? Any thoughts, Naomi?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. We work with the whole spectrum. So we work with primary, secondary, and also with some of the work we go up to the age of 25. So in primary, I think one of the things that we find is play is almost embedded within children anyway. And so engaging and I guess getting young people to play is not difficult. Actually, a lot of the things that we see, especially in school environments, the teachers trying to behaviourally manage. And so when we go in and encourage play, that's a contradiction to what's often happening in the school environment. And so teachers come in and think everything's a bit out of control and there's kids running around everywhere. And we're like, no, this is great. And so that's with younger people. What we find, it changes in school context in year 10. So with young people who are in year 10, where I guess there's a shift to be more aware of like what the peers think about them, and so they engage in the games in a slightly different way. So we have a different way.
Just to interject very quickly, for year 10 is age 15 for our international.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, like 14, 15 and above. Apologies, that's the UK schooling system. But yeah, it's like it's you know, it's just post onset of puberty. So I think child development goes from caring about what your parents say or your family to caring about what your peers think, and that changes definitely within the school environment. And also the focus is very much on like academic outcomes, and so play is definitely discouraged. And so what happens is young people we're working with play on consoles, computer games, they love smartphone games, but it's almost like it's hidden, and they've got to keep it a secret. And so again, to encourage that into a classroom context or community context is slightly different. And so the older you get, I guess the more we have to encourage the play. But we find people engage. I mean, we thought initially, do people want to learn about the brain? Because it was quite sciencey, because people will position it as neuroscience, but actually, especially I think, you know, 50 and above, when they get into the knowledge about the fact that developing brain is so integrated with how they're behaving and they can understand themselves, and we're doing that through a game, that's when they really engage with the work we do. So yeah, we work across the book.
And And I guess it's, yeah, that we see like play and mental health as these two very, very different things. And I think it's really interesting thinking about, like, for example, the work that you do, Jessica, with actually integrating games into your therapy. I was wondering if you wanted to expand a bit more on that.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot to say about that, but really what it boils down to is there are so many components in how someone approaches what a game, how they approach their roles in anything digital, the avatars they create, the games that they're attracted to, in traditional games as well. So I think even if we're talking about something non-digital like Pokemon cards, you know, there's so many different characters, there's so many different evolutions, there's powers and strengths and weaknesses and everything, and what are people attracted to and how do they approach it is such a powerful, even something as simple as when we're talking about Minecraft, are they going for creative mode or not, you know, like and that may not make sense to a lot of people, but there's different arenas, different ways that all of this can show up, and a person who is looking for those nuances and different pieces of the play and what that represents is going to find a gold mine of information.
Yeah, and so
Absolutely.
to
Okay,
add on to
Sarah.
that, yeah, to add on to that, so to answer the question, we also cover, like Naomi, 5 upwards, and very similar patterns about in younger children, more of an openness to engage and more directed by parents, and moving into adolescence, more wanting that privacy and control. And I think schools prohibit some of the play by not having mobiles and things like that. But I think Jessica makes a really important point, that assuming everyone will approach a game in the same way and enjoy it in the same way, I think is not the case. It's why some people like puzzle games, some like strategy games, you know, and I think it's important to try and create spaces or environments or experiences where people can explore and push boundaries and engage in the way they want to, or, which is the sort of approach we're taking, providing lots of different types of games that ultimately achieve the same end, so that depending on someone's particular style or preferences, we're not preventing them engaging or having options. And I think that's what's exciting about the digital revolution, and particularly XR, is that it opens up more spaces and more types and more opportunities, I think, for people to play and explore themselves and others and interactions through their different preferences and styles, which I think is important to remember.
But it's interesting as well, seeing that whilst you know, these things can be available to such a wide variety of people, that there is still a lot of regulation and anxiety, especially when it comes to working with young people. So like most games are only available supposedly for people of 13 and up, and there's this whole idea of, you know, plausible deniability, like we don't do anything with kids. And with organizations like Oculus, I think, you know, as soon as you mention that you're working with children, then they are out of there. But like, how do we then like work with these big tech companies to think about how we do, you know, work with them and distribute them? Also, as a little addition to that, I didn't realize that Mark Zuckerberg's partner is in fact a paediatrician as well. So I thought that was quite an interesting link. But yeah, so how do we distribute things when there is this regulation around it, and how do we come to a place where perhaps, you know, like you said, Jessica, maybe what we do need is to develop a sort of distribution tool for mental health based games for young people? Not really a question, but if anyone has any thoughts to add to that.
I think it's really important to provide more opportunities. I know there's so many people doing really great work, but it's really hard to compete in the overcrowded space and the standard channels. And I think it's also important there are checks on evidence base and efficacy and things like that. And I'm sure Naomi will pick up on this, you know, what happens with data and all of that. So I think it's important to have somewhere to curate, maybe. But I also, the work we do is, particularly the older children they don't want to play a game about mental health. They want to play a game. And we've found that positioning it as a really fun game about dragons is much more appealing to children than saying, come and learn some wellbeing skills. So I think there's always going to be that tension of how do you get great work out there without turning off children and adolescents in the process.
So do you think it's important that it's not just like how it gets shown, but where it gets shown and how it's framed then as well? Do you think that changes how people engage with it? If you're like, this is a fun game for your mental health, rather than saying, here is a fun game. Naomi, I didn't know if you had something to add there.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and it's with health tech generally, because if you look at ed tech, there's a lot of AR and VR being applied in schools, just everywhere really, with no regulations, even though I guess hardware companies are putting some of these stipulations in. I think that there's a lot of primary schools I know that have got cardboard headsets, you know, and actually using it in an ed tech. As soon as you start to talk about health technology and it's positioned in an intervention way, that's where things slightly change. That's where we start to talk about regulation. So I think what some people are doing are actually just positioning some of this work in ed tech, but what it really does is it highlights the lack of regulations and the lack of consistency across the board with, I think, interventions and tools that are being developed, because there is no guidance, because there is a lack of leadership from the hardware companies to really care, if we're going to be honest. And also the research isn't there. We don't know about the impact of VR or AR on the development of children, because we haven't had that longitudinal study, and young people who've started using it and early adopters aren't adults yet. They haven't reached like physical maturity, and so there's, in every essence, there's always that sort of like difficulty, because usually it's people with an interest who want to do these longitudinal studies to start to look at the impact. They cost a lot and they're not as focused, you know, and also I think that the application of technology incorporated within these longitudinal studies again is an issue. So there's quite a lot of birth cohorts, I won't go on, but there's birth cohort studies in mental health that look at development like across different stages, but they're only now bringing in technology. So they're only now starting to look at technology being used in the mental health and well-being of children, young people, and so it's really important, I think, that some of those research studies are also looking at the physiological and the emotional development of young people in line with these technologies. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because you think like this is such a huge area where we think about games is like the largest cultural medium on the planet, essentially. Like I think I read a statistic a while ago that it's worth more than film and music combined, and obviously healthcare is so huge that it feels bizarre that people are so risk averse around this, because surely the people with the money see it as a, you know, a pretty ubiquitous area to explore. So who are the people that we need to convince then? Like, who are the people that we need to work with to think about what this looks like? Is it the tech companies? Is it healthcare organizations? Is it insurance companies? Is it all of them? Nikki, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I do. Well, I don't, of course, have an answer. I think it's too early for a clear-cut answer, but I do feel that actually we have a very good chance here, because what we are missing, or the big problem that we are facing, is a curation, a joint platform, you know, enough money to have good and visible curation. You know, in the way that books, when they came about, suddenly had libraries, you know, this beautiful public space where there is curation. And obviously, like you quite rightly said, like the big players like Facebook, they're hands off on that. And that is a shame, but it's actually good news, because we're talking about mental health, we're talking about real human lives, we're talking about people that that are at risk. So having a big, you know, for-profit organization like Facebook calling the shots on this, heaven forbid for me. So actually, it's, for me, it feels nice that the big players are leaving it open. So I see this being a good chance to do it in a grassroots way, which is, of course, you know, we're all already so busy. But maybe governments and government healthcare organizations could have a role in this by having, by listening to advisors and having a clear-cut agenda for this kind of stuff. To let it come from a place that at least has a moral compass.
Absolutely. And Dawn, with your experience of supporting, health tech startups over the years through Barclays, I mean, have you come across many like VR health tech products that you've kind of seen grow and develop, and what do you see as the difference between organizations that you've supported that perhaps aren't using things like AR and VR compared to more traditional routes?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, working with a lot of health tech businesses across the UK, it seems that the VR or XR kind of technologies, well, especially VR and AR, are sort of the lesser of the technologies that are being utilised at the moment. A lot of people are concentrating obviously on AI and looking at that kind of aspect of how they can implement AI into, say, hospitals or into a clinical setting. And I think it is great to see that there is sort of progress in this particular area, especially from the work that I've been doing with yourselves and understanding the other different businesses out there over the years that we've been working together, and all the different kind of technologies in regards to VR that we've seen over that time as well. It's just been fascinating to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's such a unique form of technology because it does rely on things that are expensive and often inaccessible, and it's unrealistic to expect people to purchase their own headsets. And so I guess it really is, like you say, Nikki, working with like bigger government organizations, healthcare hospitals, thinking what a location-based experience in a hospital might look like, and how you have a sort of variety of experiences available. But also I think really thinking about who is creating these experiences. And I think, you have to come from a certain level of privilege to even try out VR often in the first place, let alone be able to take the risk of getting involved in an industry where there isn't a clear route to market just yet, and it is very, very uncertain. So how do we get more people involved? How do we start educating people? I mean, having opportunities like this to talk about it and make these discussions publicly accessible. But, how do we educate young people perhaps on how to even start making their own VR experiences? And I was wondering if any of you have had that experience of being able to mentor young people.
So I know Digital Schoolhouse do a really fantastic program around, and then I saw something online, someone's created a 1-week experience using Zapwork Studio, which one of the headsets we were looking at, to create school kids in a week can create like an AR storybook. So it looks like there's really great work happening, and I think I've been surprised as I carry around the app and our cards and show it to people. I'm just surprised actually how many adults have never seen any of this. And so I think there's a piece to be done, not just around educating young people about how potentially easy it is to get into and what's available now with some of the cardboard headsets, some of the software available, but actually I think there's a real piece around adults as well, that it's such a niche area still, and a lot of people just aren't even aware of it. And we've found that even people that did the tiger in your front room during lockdown still haven't really connected the dots of what industry that's in, and that's AR or VR or anything like that. So I think there's a big bit of linking up the dots for people, both adults and children.
Absolutely. I remember meeting somebody a while ago that was doing some really incredible work out in Jackson, Mississippi, in the US, about getting young people involved in science and technology and the arts, and that there's a real issue that she said out there around things like tall poppy syndrome, and the idea that your kids might have ambitions that perhaps are very different to yours, and when you can't wrap your head around these experiences, then you're probably not going to be supporting your child through doing something like that. So I think using play and, you know, educating people and making it appealing and interesting rather than seeing like these walls of code and being like, what, is really important, just to get everyone bought in. And same with mental health as well. These are awkward conversations, and I think that's why everything that you're all doing is so exciting and interesting, because, you know, it's not just for kids, it's everyone. And I hate that there's this idea that as you get older you can't play anymore. And I think actually the reason that, at least for me, I'm really passionate about this field is because I still want to be Sabrina the Teenage Witch and make paint fly in the air and have these like really kind of amazing experiences where you can learn about yourself and connect with other people. We are pretty much just out of time, so I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for taking the time to join us this evening. I think we could talk for so much longer, and thank you so much to Barclays as well for supporting this. Like, it's so awesome to see like a bank like being willing to support like having mad conversations about play and games and mental health, and I hope that more people do that. I'm not paid to do this, but also, well, I'm paid to do this, but not to talk about other cool books. And I've been buying loads of books about play and games recently. And for anyone that's interested in reading more, I just started reading Checkpoint, how video games power up minds, kick ass, and save lives. And there's a whole chapter on Deep in here as well, which is super duper cool. And oh my god, I've actually got quite a few. Infinite Playground, A Player's Guide to the Imagination, super duper cool. And also up by some friends up in Dundee at In-Game University is Punk Playthings, which is a really cool approach to making games in non-traditional ways. This is just my bedside reading list basically, but anyway, it's 6:30 and I'm sure it's time for everyone to grab another beer, have some dinner, and perhaps absorb everything we've been discussing this evening. So thank you everyone, and we'll see you hopefully on the 25th of November for Grief and XR. Thanks everyone.